everyone, welcome back to our channel Artificial and Facts, where you can find so many videos about economics. So, in this video, today we will learn about shift in supply curves. So, I think many of you guys have know about what is supply curve, and now we will learn how does it shift. So, without any further ado, let's just get into our next topic. So, before learning more about what is shift in supply curve, we want to learn about what is supply as it is in supply curve. So, supply is a fundamental economic concept that describes the total amount of a specific good or service that is available to the consumers. Supply can relate to the amount available at a specific price or the amount available across a range of prices if displayed on a graph. This relates closely to the demand for a good service at a specific. All else being equal, the supply provided by the producers will rise if the price rises because all firms look to maximize profits. The concept of supply in economics is complex, with many mathematical formulas, practical applications, and contributing factors. While supply can refer to anything in demand that is sold in a competitive marketplace, supply is most used to refer to goods, services, or labor. One of the most important factors that affects supply is the goods price. Generally, if a goods price increases, so will the supply. The price of related goods and the price of inputs, as it is energy, raw materials, or labor, also affect as they contribute to increasing the overall price of the goods sold. Supply in economics is defined as the total amount of a given product or service a supplier offers to consumers at a given period and a given price level. It is usually determined by market movement. For instance, a higher demand may push a supplier to increase supply, and ideally, supply and demand would be equal. Assuming all factors are constant, under the law of supply, the demand for more units of a product gives the supplier a positive indication to increase their supplies. In turn, this could be lead to higher prices. Actual patterns may vary across products and services. Several factors affect the supply and demand pattern, including change in manufacturing cost, consumer preferences, government subsidies, and extreme weather. So, now we have learned what is supply. So next, we will learn what is supply curve. Supply curve in economics is a graphic representation of the relationship between product price and quantity of product that a seller is willing and able to supply. Product price is measured on the vertical axis of the graph and quantity of product supplied on the horizontal axis of the graph. The quantity of a commodity that is supplied in the market depends not only on the price obtainable for the commodity but also potentially many other factors, such as the price of substitute products, the production technology, and the availability and the cost of labor, and other factors of productions. In basic economic analysis, analyzing supply involves looking at the relationship between various prices and the quantity potentially offered by the producers at each price. Again, holding constant are other factors that could influence the price. Those price quantity combinations may be plotted on a curve, known as a supply curve, with the price represented on the vertical axis and quantity represented on the horizontal axis. A supply curve is usually upward sloping, reflecting the willingness of producers to sell more of the commodity they produce in the market with higher prices. Any change in non-price factors will cause a shift in the supply curve, whereas changes in the price of the commodity can be traced along fixed supply curve. The supply curve is a graphic representation of the correlation between the cost of a good or service and the quantity supplied for a given period. In a typical illustration, the price will appear on the left vertical axis, while the quantity supplied will appear on the horizontal axis. The supply curve will move upward from the left to right, which expresses the law of supply. As the price of a given commodity increases, the quantity supplied increase, or R else being equal. Note that this formulation implies that price is the independent variable and quantity the dependent variable. In most disciplines, the independent variable appears on the horizontal or x-axis, but economics is an exception to this rule. So now, we will learn about how supply curve perform. The first one, there is a price versus quantity supplied. In mathematics, the quantity on the y-axis or vertical axis is referred to the dependent variable and the quantity on the x-axis is referred on the independent variable. However, the placement of price and quantity on the axis is somewhat arbitrary, and it should not be inferred that either of them is a dependent variable in a strict sense. And second, there is the law of supply. The law of supply that all else being equal, the quantity supplied of an item increases as the price increases and vice versa. The all else being equal part is important here, since it means that input price, technology, expectations, and so on are held constant and only the price is changing, like what we can see in the graph under our right side. And the third, the supply curve. Start by plotting the points in the supply schedule on the left. The rest of the supply curve can be formed by plotting the applicable price or quantity pairs at every possible price point. And now we will learn how to find the slope of the market supply curve. Since slope is defined as the change in the variable on the y-axis divided by the change in the variable on the x-axis, as we can see on the graph, the slope of the supply curve equals the change in price divided by the change in quantity between the 2 points labeled above. The slope is 6 minus 4 per 6 minus 3 or 2 per 3. Note that slope is positive as the curve slopes up and right. Since this supply curve is a straight line, the slope of the curve is the same at all points. The other factors is 5. Change in quantity supplied. A movement from one point to another along the same supply curve as illustrated above is referred to as a change in quantity supplied. Change in quantity supplied are due to the change in prices, like what you can see at the graph on the left. And now the supply curve equation. The supply curve can be written algebraically. The convention is for the supply curve to be written as quantity supplied as a function of price. The inverse supply curve, on the other hand, is the price of a function of quantity supplied. The equations above the equations above correspond to the supply curve shown earlier. When given an equation for a supply curve, the easiest way to plot it is to focus on the point that intersects the price axis. The point on the price axis is where the quantity demanded equals 0, or where 0 equals to 3 plus 3 per 2 times price, or P. This occurs where P equals 2. Because this supply curve is a straight line, you can just plot one of the random price or quantity pair and then connect the points. You will most often work with the regularly supply curve. But there are few scenarios when the inverse supply curve is very helpful. Luckily, it is fairly straightforward to switch between the supply curve and the inverse supply curve by solving algebraically for the desired able variable. So now, the factors that can affect supply curve. The first one, there is a decrease in cost of production, which means business can supply more at each price. Lower costs could be due to lower wages, lower raw material cost. And the second factor is there are more firms. An increase in the number of producers will cause an increase in supply. And the third, there are investment in capacity, expansion in the capacity of existing firms, like a building and a new factory. And then fourth, there are related supply. If there is an increase in the supply of beef, as the example, then there will be also be in the supply of leather. The fifth, there are technological improvements. Technological improvements, like what it is in the automation reducing firms' costs. And then there are lower taxes by the government that can reduce the cost of the goods. And then now we can learn how supply curve shifting. A positive change in supply when demand is constant shift in the supply curve to the right, which results in an intersection that yields lower prices and higher quantity. And negative changes in supply, on the other hand, shift the curve to the left, causing prices to rise and the quantity to decrease. The supply curve will move upward from left to the right, which expresses the law of supply. As the price of a given commodity increases, the quantity supplied increases. Note that this formulation implies that price is the independent variable. The effects of changing supply and demands are found by plotting the two variables on a graph. The horizontal x-axis represents quantity and the vertical y-axis represents price. If a factor besides price or quantity changes, a new supply curve needs to be drawn. For example, say that some new soybean farmers enter the market, clearing forests and increasing the amount of land devoted to soybean cultivation. In this scenario, more soybeans will be produced even if the price remains the same, meaning that the supply curve itself shifts to the right, like in S2 in the graph below. In other words, supply will increase. Other factors that can shift the supply curve as well, such as a change in the price of production. If a drought causes water price to spike, the curve will shift to the left, like it is in S3 on the graph. If the price of a substitute from the supplier's perspective, such as a corn increase, farmers will shift to growing that instead, and the supply of soybeans will decrease like it is in S3 in the graph. If a new technology, such as pest-resistant seed, increase yields, the supply curve will shift right to the right, like it is in S2. If the future price of soybean is higher than the current price, the supply will temporarily shift to the left, like it is in S3 position, since producers have an incentive to wait to sell. So I think that's all what can we learn about shift in supply curve. I hope that these new lessons today can help you guys to learn how to make a shift in supply curve. So thank you for the attention for today's presentations. I hope that we can do more presentations in the future. Please don't forget to like and subscribe this channel. See you guys next time. Bye bye.